Have you found a home you love and want to write an offer on? Or are you thinking about buying a home in the near future? Well, in this video, we're going to go over exactly what to expect when writing your first offer on a home, and most importantly, the legally binding terms you're agreeing to. First off, guys, I know real estate contracts are extremely boring. However, if you're like me, buying a home is the biggest purchase you will make in your life. And there are a lot of very important terms you will be agreeing to in this contract. So if you can give me just 10 minutes of your time, I will help make sure you're not hit with any surprises during the process. I'm Scott with Homeport Residential. Let's get started writing your first offer. It's 2022 and California has a brand new purchase contract. The entire document is 25 pages long, and of that, 9 pages are what's known as advisories and disclosures. The contract itself is 16 pages long. While it's important to understand the entire document, it's worth noting that the advisories and disclosures are meant to educate and inform home buyers, while the contract is a legally binding document that each term agreed to by the buyer can be enforced and upheld by a court of law. I have another video you can check out if you want more information on the disclosures. For now, let's just jump right into the contract. The new purchase agreement has moved all the offer terms such as price, type of financing, length of contract, and buyer contingency timelines to the first 3 pages of the contract, so it's easier for the buyer to see all the terms they are agreeing to up front. The contract begins with paragraph 1 by identifying when it was written, who the offer is from, and the address and accessory parcel number or tax number the home the offer is written for. Paragraph 2 reiterates the type of agency both the buyer and seller have with their agent. Remember, your agent is either representing you exclusively or representing you and the seller at the same time. Paragraph 3 lists all the terms of the purchase and allocation of cost between the buyer and the seller. It's important to note here that each term identified and each allocation of cost has its own paragraph for further explanation later on in the contract, and both the buyers and sellers should read all 16 pages. The terms and conditions starts with line 3 alpha, which is simply the purchase price offered by the buyers for the home. Notice under the additional terms section, there is a box you could select that reads all cash. This is a good time to point out when you're reading this section and you come across a term or condition with a checkbox in it. If that box is unchecked, that term or condition is not applicable. Line item 3B or Bravo is when the home sale or escrow will officially close. You can select how many days the escrow period will be, or select an exact date to close on the sale of the home. This is the best day in the whole process, as it is generally when you get the keys to your new home. Line item 3C or Charlie identifies how long the buyer's offer is valid for. Quick buyer's tip here: after you submit an offer to the sellers, you can withdraw that offer at any time before the expiration date, as long as your agent has not communicated to you that the sellers have accepted your offer. Line item 3D is the initial deposit amount offered by the buyer. Most offers that I see offer anywhere between 1% to 3% of the purchase price as their earnest money deposit. Keep in mind, you're asking the sellers to take their home off the market to open escrow. So as a buyer, this is where you need to show you're willing to put some skin in the game. Increased deposits are not used very often for first-time home buyers. However, buyers can offer to increase their deposit amount after they have completed various home inspections, etc. Line item 3E lists how much money the borrower will be financing on the home, the interest rate they will not exceed, and the type of home loan the buyer will be using. Line item 3E2, additional financing amount, is also generally not used by first-time home buyers. Line item 3E3 identifies if the home will be the buyer's primary residence or an investment property. Line item 3F lists how much the total down payment the buyer will be putting down on their home loan. Line item 3G lists if the seller will be providing any credits or concessions to the buyers. These credits could be in lieu of any repairs made by the seller or to help the buyer with their closing costs. However, in a seller's market, these credits are extremely rare and hard to come by. Line item 3H, 1, 2, and 3, identify the various documents verifying the buyer has enough cash on hand to cover the purchase price of the home, the down payment, and closing costs as applicable. It also verifies the buyer's loan application and pre-approval or pre-qualification. Buyer's note here, if you can complete all the requirements with your lender to get fully underwritten, that makes your offer much more competitive to the sellers. Line item 3J identifies the date when the final verification of condition, otherwise known as the buyer's final walkthrough, will happen. Line item 3K lists how long the buyer has to assign their interest in the purchase to either the buyer's own trust or an entity that is wholly owned by themselves. No other form of assignment are allowed in the standard purchase contract here in California. The next section of the contract describes the buyer's contingencies that protects the buyer's earnest money deposit while the buyer conducts all of their inspections on the home and works towards obtaining their final loan approval. Line item 3L, 1, and 2 is for the buyer's loan and appraisal contingencies and defaults to 17 days. You can shorten or lengthen the number of days here, and you also have the option to waive those contingencies as well, although that's definitely not recommended for first-time home buyers. Line item 3L3 is the buyer's investigation contingency, and for any and all home inspections the buyer would like to conduct on the home, and defaults to 17 days as well. Line item 3L4 through 7 are the timeframes that the buyer has to review all the seller disclosures, title reports, any leased items that convey with the home, and any CC&Rs, or what's known as covenants, conditions, and restrictions for properties that are located with an HOA community. These all default to 17 days or 5 days after receiving each set of documents from the seller, whichever is later. Line item 3L8 is the contingency used when the buyer will need to sell their own home as a contingency to purchase the new home. Buyer's note, in a seller's market, it's next to impossible to get your offer accepted if you're using this contingency. Line items 3M1 through 3 describes when the buyer will take possession of the home, if there is any rent back period to the sellers after the sale, or if the home is being sold while tenants have an active lease and will still be living in the home after the home sale closes. Line item 3N1 through N4 list all the timelines the seller has to deliver all the documents to the buyer, sign and return their escrow paperwork, pay for and order any HOA documents if applicable, as well as install required smoke detectors, alarms, CO2 detectors, and appropriate water heater bracing. The next section of the contract, paragraph 3, Popple 1 and 2, identify all items in the home that either are included or excluded in the sale. This is primarily focused on major appliances, home security systems, above ground pools, and spas, etc. The bottom line on this section is to ensure if you want something in the home or don't want it left behind, be certain to list it here. Even if something is listed as saying it's staying with the home in the MLS, if it's not in the contract, it doesn't matter. Paragraph 3Q1 through 18 describes all the allocation of costs between the buyer and seller for most of the common closing costs associated with a home sale and purchase in California. You'll want to review each line item with your realtor carefully so you know exactly which costs you will be responsible for with your offer. I have a separate video that breaks down all the different types of closing costs. You can check that out as well. Paragraph 3R is for any other additional terms the buyer wishes to add with their offer. Paragraph 4 of the contract identifies any additional addendums or advisories that the buyer is including with their offer that are specific for this home purchase. For example, if you're buying a manufactured home, you would include the manufactured home purchase addendum. And if you're using a VA home loan, you would use the VA and FHA addendum. Paragraph 5 and the rest of the contract contains a more detailed explanation of all the terms that we just went over. There's also highlighted sections on arbitration and mediation that every buyer needs to read before submitting their offer, and a section for the escrow company that will handle the home sale to acknowledge receipt of the purchase contract. Now, I know we covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time, but I want to wrap this video up with a few important points. As a buyer, it's absolutely your responsibility to read and understand this entire contract. After all, it's your money on the line. I would encourage you to read the purchase contract ahead of time and ask your realtor if there's anything at all you don't fully understand. As a buyer, if you take the time to understand the purchase contract before you write your first offer on a home, you will be way ahead of the process and likely to have a more smooth and seamless home purchase. If you have any questions at all about anything we went over, be sure to leave them in the comments below, or you can always reach out to me directly. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.